Ba 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 bum 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 ba 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 bum bum ba 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 bum 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 ba 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 bum bum. Hello and welcome, esteemed guests, to my channel. My name is Ainsley. Let's do stuff. Today we are doing a very special Create a Sim video, the first in what I'm hoping is going to be a series. I talked a little bit in a previous video about doing an OTP series where I do some of my favorite OTPs. For those who don't know, One True Pairing, it's sort of fandom lingo. I'm a bit of a fandom nerd. So I decided to just take the jump and go for it. I put a lot of thought into, which pairing should be the one I debut with. What is, if I only have one opportunity to hook people on this concept, what is the ship that I lead with? And I kept coming back to McDanno. That's the pairing of Steve McGarrett and Danny Williams from Hawai'i 5 I didn't mean for this to line up so perfectly with Island Living. I had this spot in my schedule written out for, first video in OTP series when I was doing my planning for my Pride Month videos, but I'm actually really happy about it because Hawai'i 5 as the title implies, is set in Hawaii on, I think it's the island of Oahu. It's definitely filmed in Oahu anyway. Fair warning out the gate, a lot of this video is just me messing with Steve's face, trying to get him to look as much like Alex O'Loughlin as I can, and I just kind of give up at the end, but there is a lot of fiddling before I finally throw in the towel. I'll talk a bit more about the specific issues I was having when I get there. A lot of it is just that I don't know if I started with the wrong base face, but it's like you couldn't make his face long enough in the right way. Anyway, back to the OTP aspect of this video, because I do imagine that a lot of this is going to be me talking about the ship and not so much about my Create a Sim process. Hopefully everyone is down for that. Definitely let me know in the comments down below if you like this kind of video or not. A bit about why I chose McDanno to be my debut ship. I just kept thinking about what is the one ship that if I could take someone who's never seen the show before and just say, hey, look, this has merit, just watch this for the ship. I feel like there are so many ships where I would recommend someone the ship because of the fandom built around it, and that, there are good moments in canon, but a lot of what's so enjoyable about the ship is the fandom. But actually, McDanno is so much the root of Hawai'i 5 It is the core of the show. Whether you view it as romantic or platonic, it doesn't really matter. That show can't survive without that relationship. They are in almost every episode together, and their relationship is the core of the show. So that's kind of why I thought, okay, this is what I start with. And the fandom is fantastic. I haven't personally dipped my toes in a while. I don't know how active it still is. I know the show is still airing, but I have read some of the most incredible fics under the McDanno tag on Archive of Our Own. It really is a good fandom to go along with a good canon. There are a lot of good undercover as a couple fics, and there are a lot of hurt comfort fics, which you definitely need because the canon of the show does deal out a whole lot of hurt. And where it is an episodic show, there are some arcs that carry over, but for the most part, there's a bit of a resetting to a blank slate to kind of keep with the status quo. Not awful. It's not like CSI, I found, right? Didn't matter where you watched an episode, the characters were the characters, nothing really changed. There's definitely some growth and there's some reward to the characters and the plot lines and the storylines. Otherwise, it really wouldn't hold my interest. But it's not as much as serialized shows. You don't get that same payoff, but that's where the fics shine. A bit of backstory on Steve and Danny for anybody who isn't familiar with the show and has made it this far into the video. Bless you. Steve is a former Navy SEAL, and he gets drawn back to the island of Hawaii where he grew up because his father is brutally murdered. While he's looking into his father's death, he meets the lead investigator that's actually on the case, Danny Williams, who's a cop from New Jersey who moved out to Hawaii when he separated from his wife. She moved out here with her new husband and their daughter, Grace. And Danny is all about his daughter and his family, and he couldn't, imagine not being able to see her, so he moves to Hawaii to be with Grace. I won't get into too many spoilers about, who actually killed Steve's dad, mainly because it's been a while and I don't fully remember, but that's not essential to understanding the ship. Basically, what you need to understand is that when Danny and Steve first run into each other while they're each investigating Steve's father's murder, there's a lot of yelling and a lot of pointing guns at each other, and I think they end up both punching and shooting each other in the first episode. It's just one of those real, instant butting of heads that has that great chemistry where you're like, oh, okay, there's tension here, there's something here. And what I find so great about their relationship is that tension goes from a bit of a legitimate animosity to this lovely sort of bickering old married couple kind of thing. The height of this ship definitely existed in a time when queerbaiting was at an all-time high and a legitimate thing that, production companies were doing and not just a fancy buzzword that gets thrown around. The show first aired in 2010, which was 2 years after Castiel arrived on Supernatural and was just a year before Teen Wolf. So you're looking at right around that time when there was a lot of talk of Destiel, there was a lot of talk of Steric, there was a lot of talk of John Locke even around this time. So as a result, you get quite a few instances of things that happen in canon that do feel very queerbaity and very shipbaity. There's a lot of people mistaking them for actual husbands, and much later on in maybe the 6th or 7th season, they even do an episode where they go undercover for couples counseling. Now, I'm from a generation where we just did not have the kind of representation that we have today, and I'm not saying that as someone who's in their 30s. I'm only 23, but even I remember when I was in high school and when I was growing up, there was nothing. We didn't have the representation that we have today. So for shows to do things that were a little bit queerbaity and a little bit took advantage of their queer audiences, that was still very much okay. Like a surprise Rosa Diaz is actually bi because the audience wants it would never have happened when I was a teenager. So I think as a result, fandom took what the writers and what the production team was giving us as kind of scraps and as something to keep us hanging on to get ad money out of us. We just took it and ran with it and made a fandom around it. And boy, oh boy, did they ever give. Talk about a good base. It's not like Dean and Cass where they're not always together and they have these great moments of gravitas, but they're few and far between. McDanno really is always at one another's side. And I think one of the fun things about the fact that it is a week-to-week crime show is that more and more outlandish things and horrible things have to keep happening to them. So it's really interesting, and it provides such a wealth of content for creators to draw from because the story is so deep and so involved, and they are so entrenched in each other's lives through all of these ups and downs. And for anybody who likes found family feels, this show definitely has them. Actually, I have to say that after Daniel Day Kim and Grace Park, who played Chin-ho and Kono, left the show, I really wasn't able to get into it or get as invested, even with McDanno as kind of the heart of the show, because it also is so much about how the 5-0 team are a family. And when you look at Danny and his daughter Grace, there are so many great fics about, Uncle Steve, sort of Grace realizing before even they do that, hey, I think my dad actually likes Steve. So there is such a great broad range of fandom content, from really soft and domestic to sort of hot and smutty, if that's your thing, to deep looks at the psychology of men who've had to endure the horrors that the show puts them through. And I think what's also great because it's an episodic show is that there are so many plot threads and so many bits of backstory that just get layered in and then dropped or lost or forgotten about. And it's such a wealth of content for creators to draw from. And it's also a really great fandom for having pieces that are really deep and thoughtful about queer issues, especially with Steve, where he's from the Navy. He would have endured, a don't ask, don't tell. So there's a lot of fics that examine the internalized homophobia or biphobia that he would experience, that maybe he's not out to himself when the series begins and he first meets Danny, and other fics still assume that he was comfortable with his sexuality even when he was in the Navy, but he's coming off a life of having to hide that. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed in 2011, so that's a whole year that this show was on before that law was changed. There's also a little niche group of people who write a lot of trans Danny as a trans man. I'm assuming because Scott Conn is kind of a shorter guy, but by all means, people can write characters as trans for whatever arbitrary reason they want. That's what transformative fiction is for. And just to hop into the creative aspect, I tried shorter hair on Steve because it made him look the most like Alex O'Loughlin of anything I put him in, but it didn't work, so I picked a different hairstyle, and I'm kind of okay with how he ends up looking. We're coming up on the end of the video about now, so I just wanted to say, where this is the first video in what I'm hoping to be a series, please do let me know in the comments down below what you think of the series, how you like it, if there's anything you'd want to see differently. Do people feel comfortable with all the fandom jargon, or would you like me to use more plain English? Just let me know. I'm totally open to all your suggestions. Do any of you ship McDanno? Let me know that as well. And are there any ships that you'd like to see come to this series? I'm mainly doing this so that I can get out all of my own fandom nerdiness, but I will definitely take your suggestions into consideration. Music for this video was done by Chucky, as always, link to his SoundCloud below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, comment and subscribe, and until next time, get out there and do stuff.